Today, we're going to talk about the impact of gender quotas on electoral participation. Various arguments have been proposed in favor of and against the introduction of quotas as a tool to increase women's political empowerment. Those supporting the quota system argue that it represents a powerful method for achieving a gender balance in political institutions. On the other hand, those opposing quotas argue that this instrument is against the principle of equal opportunity, since women are given an advantage over men. The existing literature on the effects of gender quotas have mainly investigated their effects on political choice and on gender stereotypes, but little is known about how gender quotas affect turnout and voter behavior. Understanding whether gender quotas affect electoral turnout is relevant since turnout is often considered a crucial indicator of democracy. Voter turnout could also be a measure of the quality of institutions. Gender quotas could affect the expected utility of voters. Female politicians may be perceived as less experienced or as less corrupt than males. It could be that voters obtain utility from voting for candidates of their own gender, and a higher number of female candidates may increase the number of female electors who decide to cast their vote.
Gender quotas were introduced in Italy in 1993 and repealed in 1995. Only municipalities that had an election in the period between 1993 and 1995 were affected by the reform. Using the temporary adoption of gender quotas, they analyzed the effects of this law on electoral participation. Given the application of the law, they were able to identify treatment and control groups and apply a difference in difference estimation technique to identify the effects of gender quotas in electoral participation. This law established the reservation of candidacies to female candidates. Unlike other quota systems based on reservation of seats, this law did not ensure that a minimum number of females would be elected. For each municipal election, they had information on the number of valid ballots, invalid ballots, blank ballots, and the number of people eligible to vote. Due to staggered re-election dates, we cannot compare the voting behaviors of the treatment and the control groups in the same year. Despite this disadvantage, they know that the treatment status was exogenous because municipal elections in Italy are held every 5 years and municipal governments cannot choose their election schedule. For the treatment group, we compare the turnout at elections that took place immediately before the introduction of gender quotas in 1990 with outcomes at elections which took place between 1993 and 1995. For the control group, we compare outcomes at elections which took place immediately before the gender quota reform with electoral outcomes of elections held during the period 1993 to 1999. Their key assumption is that without the policy intervention, the difference in electoral participation between treatment and control groups would have remained constant over time. The regression is as follows. Y measures the turnout rate and the percentage of blanks, invalid, and valid votes in municipality I in election year T. B3 measures the difference in the temporal variation of electoral outcomes between the municipalities voting and those not voting under the gender quota system. X is a vector of municipal characteristics.
In Table 4, the paper presents its results from the ordinary least squared estimates of the last specification. In column 1, we find that before the gender quota reform, municipalities presented a turnout higher for 2.5 percentage points. In the same column, we can see that the coefficient of the interaction term is positive and highly statistically significant. The difference in turnout between treatment and control municipalities increased by 2.7 percentage points after the reform. Also, the percentage of valid votes was positively affected by the reform. Valid votes shown an increase of 2.2 percentage points in treated municipalities with respect to the control group's municipalities. This suggests that an increase in female candidates produces an increase in voters' political participation. An important issue that has not been investigated enough is whether female and male electors react differently to the introduction of gender quotas. In Italy, authors find out that male turnout is in general slightly higher than the female turnout. But when the gender quotas reform were introduced, both males and females react positively to the introduction of gender quotas. See the interaction coefficient. Let's make a brief summary. Recall, first, The temporary adoption of gender quotas in Italy allowed them to identify treatment and control groups, and this allowed them to implement a different indifferences strategy to finally compare their outcome variables before and after the gender quota system. Turnout showed a declining temporal trend. However, it has decreased significantly less for municipalities affected by the gender quota reform, and this effect is led by an increase in valid votes. They also find that both female and male electors react positively to the introduction of gender quotas, but the reactions of females are always stronger than those of males. This finding is probably due to the fact that female representatives are expected to give special attention to women's needs and preferences. They also find that positive impact on electoral turnout vanished once the gender quota system was removed. The results suggest that gender quotas, in addition to the positive effects on female representation in politics and on anti-female stereotypes, may also improve women's conditions by introducing more female electors to vote.